and I agree with you in everything you just said, 100%. The Republican Party's become a cult of personality.
Here at Pondering Politics, we've been tracking the political and philosophical journey of pro-MAGA or MAGA-adjacent comedians, influencers, and podcasters who previously supported Trump, but have slowly started to back away from him as his stupidity and authoritarianism take hold. People like Joe Rogan, Andrew Schultz, and the Flagrant podcast, as well as comedian Tim Dillon. And during the most recent episode of the Tim Dillon Show, he hosted an interview with Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders got Tim Dillon to admit that MAGA is a cult of personality, which is pretty shocking given how close Tim Dillon was to MAGA for all intents and purposes just a couple of months ago. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, the entire conversation is really good between Bernie and Tim. Bernie's really good in this setting, but I want to focus on this particular segment.
Is the Democratic Party, in your view, a bigger obstacle to your ideas becoming mainstream than the Republican Party?
No.
I'll stop right there. I know a lot of people more on the center left give Bernie Sanders a lot of shit because he is, again, a registered independent. He caucuses with the Democrats, but he'll also criticize more establishment Democrats along the way. I'm of the personality that when you're part of a movement, it's okay to give constructive criticism while recognizing that the other side is worse, especially when the other side is a fascist authoritarian party. And that really is what Bernie Sanders does here. A lot of people say, oh, Bernie pretends that both the Democrats and the Republicans are equally bad. He doesn't. He said very plainly, no. The Republicans are the greater obstacle to my ideas becoming mainstream. And he's about to explain why, much to Tim Dillon's surprise, but Dillon seems to be persuaded.
Look, the Republican Party in the last 15 years under Trump has undergone a major transformation. It used to be kind of a conventional George W. Bush, a center-right party, right? That's what it was. It represented the wealthy, corporate interests, banks, etc. What Trump has done is really transformed that party. He won more working class votes than did Kamala Harris. And he has created in the Republican Party a right-wing extremist party. And also what worries me is not only their ideology, is this cult of the individual. You know what I'm talking about when I mentioned that, Tim?
Explain it, but
what I mean is...
So again, he's not quite there yet, but I'm telling you, in just a few minutes, Tim Dillon's going to be like, yeah, actually, I think you're 100% right.
I think I do.
Look, it's one thing. You're a Republican, I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat, I'm a Democrat. We argue amongst ourselves. Your job is to represent your congressional district, your state, if you're in the Senate. Right now in the Republican Party, with very few exceptions, and there are some, they follow what Trump says, and they are afraid to move in any different direction. I'll give you one example, a very clear example. A guy named Tom Tillis. That name mean anything to you?
Yeah.
Tom is a conservative, senator from North Carolina. So the guy made the mistake of actually reading this big, beautiful bill that Trump brought forth. He concluded, he says, it's going to be a disaster for North Carolina. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to lose their health care. Health care premiums are going to soar. I can't vote for this. The next day, Trump was all over social media attacking this guy, and the billionaires were saying, we are going to spend unlimited amounts of money to defeat you in your primary. A day later, Mr. Tillis said, bye-bye, I'm out of here. I don't need this crap.
So I'm going to stop right there because there's more to it. Remember, I live in North Carolina. Tom Tillis is one of my senators. He is not one of the most deranged Republicans. He's still been a colossal pain in the ass. But yes, this is true. We talked about this, that after he deviated from Trump and Trump went nuclear on him one time too many, Tom Tillis said, you know what? Peace. I'm out. I'm done. I'm not seeking re-election. I don't need to put up with this shit. Now, he has still, I was hoping he would then take that freedom to deviate more from Trump with the remaining time in office that he has, because his term expires in, I guess it's January 2027, because he would be replaced. He would be up for re-election in the 2026 midterms. I was hoping he would use that time to, stick a metaphorical thumb in the eye of the Trump administration. He has, on occasion, rhetorically, but for the most part, he has stayed, for the most part, in his lane. It's very frustrating. But it's also created an opportunity for my former Democratic governor, Roy Cooper, to run and fill that vacancy. So now that it's going to still be a close election, but right now it's slightly tilted in our favor. But it says something that Tom Tillis was driven out, and very foolish of Trump to do that, because it has now made North Carolina competitive.
And he retired.
He retired.
Yeah.
Because he was going to face a very, very difficult primary. And that's what it is right now. You are a congressman. You kind of disagree with Trump on this. Are you really going to open your mouth and have Elon Musk saying, okay, we're going to primary you. My guy's going to get $50 million to
Right.
beat you.
My wonder is, because I look at, and I agree with you, and everything you just said, 100%, the Republican Party's become a cult of personality. When somebody goes, we're gonna release the Epstein files, and then they don't, and then everybody moves on, and then they go, what about Jimmy Kimmel?
There you go. So by the end of it, Bernie was able to persuade Tim Dillon that MAGA is a cult of personality, that campaigns on one thing but will contradict themselves the next second for the sake of political expedience. And for the most of them, for the most part, there is no consistency. There is no commitment to principle. There's just whatever the dear leader wants. And the Epstein files have been a particular bugbear for Tim Dillon, because he has believed that there's been a deep conspiracy about the Epstein files for years. And part of his support of Trump came from the fact that Trump campaigned, and Trump advisors campaigned during the 2024 election, that if Trump were elected, he would release the Epstein files. And of course, Trump reneged on that. And there was some hand-wringing from some prominent MAGA influencers, but for the most part, they've all zipped their mouth shut and fallen in line, because it's not about principle. It's not about policy. It's about whatever Donald Trump says, because he's the locus of power. And if what he says contradicts conservative principles, as it very often does, then most of the Republican Party will fall in line. It is truly an authoritarian cult of personality. Now, the reason that I am so pleased with this, and again, you should watch the entire conversation with Tim Dillon, between Tim Dillon and Bernie Sanders. I just checked. It's an hour and 5 minutes. I thought it was like 52 minutes. It goes by relatively quickly, and they have a good report. And you can tell that Tim Dillon respects Bernie Sanders, and it's really informative. The reason that I'm highlighting this is because Tim Dillon is a massively successful and hilarious comedian, even though I disagree with much of his politics. And I certainly disagree with how much support and cover he gave to Trump and the MAGA movement from the beginning. But whether we like it or not, Joe Rogan, Tim Dillon, Andrew Schultz, and these influencers and podcasts, the Nelk Boys and others, they play a role, perhaps not outcome determinative, but I do think they contribute to shaping the narrative and shaping the culture. And part of the reason that it was accepted that Trump could be returned to power after his terrible first administration, after his attempt to steal the 2020 election, after the January 6th insurrection, after all of the prosecutions and the convictions, is because Trump went on these shows and was effectively endorsed by these comedians, influencers, and podcasters. And it created a permission structure for people who are like, I don't know, this guy seems corrupt and dishonest, to think, well, maybe he's not as corrupt and dishonest as I thought, and maybe the Democrats are worse. And again, Tim Dillon has his criticism of the Democratic Party. It's actually what teed it up, because I think at the beginning of that conversation, he wanted to believe that the Democratic Party was more corrupt and more of an obstacle to genuine economic populism than the Republican Party, when in fact that's not true. There's a reason that Bernie Sanders, the OG economic populist, left-wing economic populist, caucuses with the Democrats. And that's not to say that you can't or shouldn't criticize the Democratic Party, as Bernie Sanders does. We may disagree on what the criticisms are. It's okay to have constructive criticism. But I appreciate the fact that Bernie dedicated time to say, hey, listen, whatever my complaints are of the Democratic Party, whatever your complaints of the Democratic Party are, perfectly valid. It is not fair nor accurate to say that the Democrats are as bad, let alone worse, when it comes to obstructing real economic change. It is the Republican Party. And throughout the course of this conversation, Bernie gives a number of examples about how Donald Trump is really corrupt and trying to benefit and enrich himself and his friends, not the American people. So I appreciated that. I really appreciate it. And that's why I think it's so important for Democratic politicians like Pete Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders, AOC. If you have the Riz, if you have Zoran Mamdani, if you have the Riz and the communicative skill, you need to be going on Joe Rogan and Tim Dillon and Andrew Schultz's Flagrant podcast and stuff like that, and building these bridges, because these people command vast audiences. And if we want to win future elections and win them more decisively, I think it would be good to try to establish a rapport with these people. That way they can help do the PR work as well. I think Bernie Sanders made great strides in this respect towards according Tim Dillon again. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.